My name's Trish Roberts and you're watching Faint Signals from Vega. So tonight I thought I would talk about an issue which I've been thinking about for a little while, and I'll just get straight to it really, is that I've seen a lot of white so-called left-leaning people who do a lot of videos about conspiracies. Every single time there's some sort of a mass shooting, they immediately, it's like literally within hours or, a couple of hours, out they come with an immediate that it has to be a false flag and all of that. And, the word conspiracy theory was invented by the CIA. And and that was intended to sort of make it, it's intended to sort of like, it's a pejorative thing really. But, there have been a number of conspiracy theories that have been proven correct, So, it's not like I'm against people thinking about conspiracy theories or talking about them or, sort of analyzing the data and seeing if it all matches up. Because, governments lie. That's the nature of governments, they lie. And also, it's been pretty much written into law almost that governments can spread propaganda if they want to. Openly lie to the public, and that's just fine. And, there's been, for decades, there's been the Gulf of Tonkin, there's been weapons of mass destruction that led to, 1 million Iraqis being killed, well over 1 million really, it's probably more like 2 million or more. And that's ongoing. There's, the JFK thing and all of that. But there's been a whole lot of things, probably things we don't even realize, that the government, the US government, has been, sort of inventing to to continue on its wars for resources and for hegemony in the Middle East, or Western Asia is probably a better word than the colonialist word, the Middle East. So there's been, sort of, and they're becoming more and more feeble as time goes by, like the anti-Russian propaganda. That's an appalling mess. If you've been following that, it's just been appalling. And the mainstream media, of course, just is a government mouthpiece, really, and have been for a long time. So, but I don't know, I sort of have to wonder, when, like, for example, this one with the Las Vegas shooting, and, there's holes in it. I haven't really been following it because I think, well, just say, for example, it is, just say for sake of argument, there's crisis actors, Paddock was some sort of patsy for something, and there was multiple shooters, and it was all so that they could, Chertoff and Adelson could install, sort of X-ray security things in all the in all the hotels around the place, so it was sort of like a profit-making false flag. Just say, or which never becomes the case, is heaven forbid they should take people's guns away from them. That seems to be a fear of the so-called left and right, is this, don't take guns away. They don't even, most people on the left and the right, if there's such a thing, I don't know anymore, but most people just don't even want to even talk about that, even though there's lots and lots of countries that don't have guns. They don't have guns. Like Australia, we don't really have. We had a moratorium on them in the late 90s after there was a mass shooting of 30 or more people by one person. and all the sort of illegal guns and whatever were handed in, and there hasn't been a mass shooting since. But anyway, that's another story. But so people are oftentimes they think, oh, it's a false flag so that they can take our guns away from us. This is the United States. So there's that too. But anyway, just say, for sake of argument, it was all sort of there was crisis actors, which would take a cast of thousands, because, they've interviewed people in the hospital, they've interviewed the doctors in the hospital. If the doctors were, complicit in this false flag thing, and there were crisis actors, I think everybody in the hospital would probably know. So, there were many hospitals involved. And there were people interviewed. If you look online, you can see lots and lots of people in hospital, being interviewed, and they give the name of the hospital. So if those people were crisis actors and it was all pretense, it certainly would be, everybody in the hospital would have to be complicit, because, I've worked in a hospital. I was a health professional, and, anything like that, some mass shooting or whatever, well, we always used to know, no matter where you worked in the hospital, if there was some great trauma case that came in, most people would hear about it, no matter where you were in the hospital. And I worked in a very large public hospital, a major hospital in a city. So, you'd have to have everybody in on that. And multiple hospitals, as well as all the emergency workers and the ambulance workers. And interestingly, I've never seen anybody from any of these pundits who have monetized, most of them have monetized sites, and these are great ways of getting in lots and lots of views and more advertising and more money. But none of them ever talk about that aspect of it, that you would need the complicity of all those hospitals and all the emergency workers and the ambulances and the police. And also, you'd have to rely on those 600 or more, or a few thousand even, people that were, crisis actors, also keeping quiet. So, it's... And as well as the Mandalay Hotel, the people in that hotel. So anyway, so that's sort of when people start sort of going on about it, they never ever talk about that, how you would have to have unbelievable complicity as well as keeping those people quiet about it. So that's always an interesting thing. But my point about this particular video is that oftentimes the people who are immediately putting out these videos on their monetized sites, and they're in some ways using a crisis with real, and that's the other thing about that particular Las Vegas thing. Some of them have said, well, there's definitely probably people that have been shot, but there's also crisis actors. Well, that wouldn't make sense if you have half and half. So anyway, but the thing about, a lot of these sort of online pundits have their YouTube channels, and they often have many, many thousands of people who are subscribers to their channel. And they regularly use these sort of mass shootings, and let's face it, they're frequent. I was actually just saying to someone before the Las Vegas thing, I was thinking it must be about time for a mass shooting in the United States, and I wasn't being funny. I was being serious. It's sort of like it's almost like the timing is amazing. It's like the mainstream media. It's almost like you have the Trump, sort of investigation and the sort of Russian collusion. Then you have Hillary Clinton. Then you have a mass shooting. Then you have, and it's just this ongoing, like a sort of reality TV show almost. The whole thing is like entertainment, and it's really, it's not news at all, really. Of course Hillary Clinton is a criminal, and so is Obama. Obama's a war criminal. Hillary Clinton is a war criminal. Bill Clinton is a war criminal. Donald Trump is a war criminal and a kleptocrat. They're all kleptocrats, and I could go into why if you're not aware. But they're, the whole thing now is just a kleptocracy. Everybody in Congress, in the U.S. Congress, is taking money from lobbyists. It's a pay-to-play system, from the arms industry, and of course they're going to vote for all the wars and in favor of big pharma and anything that's going to infringe on the healthcare industry. So the whole thing is corrupt. Corruption is like inherent in that, in particular in that U.S. government, and it's like water off a duck's back now. It makes Watergate look like nothing. What's going on today? Excuse me. It makes Watergate look like nothing. And it's been an appalling, and the CIA with all, with the 81 countries that they've been meddling in over the decades and overthrowing, 81 governments, most of them democratically elected governments, killing leaders, killing human rights activists, killing leaders of countries, it's sort of like, it's appalling. But I'm going off the track here because I'm getting to the point I'm going to make about pundits and the online pundits every time a mass shooting happens or something like that. And, they immediately put out their videos. It would seem, that a lot of these pundits, most of them, or pretty much all of them, I think, are white. I mean, you never hear really a peep about, like, say, for example, Mogadishu with the 300 or so people killed in a bomb blast, or, the ongoing violence with drones overseas. Brown people, basically. You never hear them fussing about, the millions of brown people who've been murdered by their government. Or that the current state of, the CIA and the US empire trying to destabilize one Middle Eastern country after another, and like they destroyed Libya, etc. You never really hear them going on about that. That's interesting, isn't it, don't you think? What, don't those people count? Is it only like when there's some, and they always refer to usually it's a white person that goes, takes out people with an automatic weapon in the United States. That's the usual thing. And apparently they're always, sort of a lone gunman who's mentally unwell, Some people refer to them as white terrorists, but, it's always presented that way. If it was a Muslim, it'd be they're a terrorist. Excuse me. But it's always, these pundits always focus on, sort of these supposed lone gunmen, and the dozens or sometimes more white people that they take out and they kill in these acts of tremendous violence. And as sad as that is, it's no less awful than what is happening overseas. Excuse me. Sorry, we have a lot of pollen around at the moment, and my throat and nose is a bit inundated with it. And my eyes. So anyway, it's this is the thing. It's like, and so and sometimes I think it's almost like it's this, and I sort of think, what is the motivation for these videos? You know, what, you know, you don't know by now that your government lies to you, and that they there's all sorts of things that they're doing in other countries, you know, agent provocateurs, and here and domestically, you know, and in other countries. You know, the government funding, the U.S. government funding ISIS and Al Qaeda, as has been proven. You know, if you've followed the Podesta emails, and Hillary Clinton knew about Saudi Arabia funding ISIS, and you know, these are inventions of the U.S. empire to help them ravage the Middle East and take the resources, the oil and the minerals, because Afghanistan has trillions of dollars worth of minerals that the U.S. government wants. And so, you know, there's, you know, ISIS and Al Qaeda, you know, they're sort of like, they were born out of this violence, and also encouraged in a way, you know, right from the 80s. With the Mujahideen and all of that. You know, Wahhabism in Saudi Arabia, which is a distortion of Islam, a complete distortion, most Muslims reject it, is a political tool to actually, you know, to ravage and fanaticize, excuse me, people in the Middle East. It's to, you know, to ravage and basically use it to go through and sort of destroy those countries. Under this, always, the US government always says it's humanitarian, you know, reasons, which is always just a nonsense. It's complete falsehood. So anyway, why would any of these pundits think that a government like that, excuse me, that is doing that sort of thing, you know, if they're involved in the Las Vegas shooting, or if the CIA or the FBI is involved in it, why would that be a surprise anyway? But as I said, you know, you'd have to have the complicity of hundreds or thousands, sorry, of people, in particular in the Las Vegas thing. But of course, I'm not denying conspiracy. The conspiracy theories, in quote, exists. There's plenty of them that have been proven correct. And I wouldn't trust the US government, the US empire, as far as I could throw them. Or the CIA, really. You know, there's some good people in the CIA, but it was born out of I mean, as somebody I interviewed for the Naked Empire said, you know, the big mistake with the CIA was inviting sort of empire regime change members, sort of employees into it. They were, you know, well. I mean, the whole, you know, the trouble started when they invited these regime change people into the CIA. I think that was the whole purpose of it all. But anyway, so anyhow, so, you know, when I see people sort of obsessing, it's like it's an apocalyptic industry. If you've noticed on YouTube, there's literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, thousands, in fact, of these. Some are just straight analysis of incidences that they consider false flags, and others are just so wacky, like wackier even than the InfoWars with Alex Jones, wackier than that. I mean, wacky, do your head in sort of wacky, where you look at it and you just think, oh, I hope these people don't really believe what they're talking about. Because I think they need some help. You know, it's seriously wacky. And just even reading the titles, I think, wow, you know. So, but I think, what are they hoping that the audience will do with this information, you know? I mean, if say, it was all a staged event, a false flag, the Las Vegas shooting, what do you do with that? It's just one more, if that was the case, it's just one more example of some sort of awful corruption and a complete callous disregard for for the public, and contempt for the public and leading them astray. For profit or whatever. I mean, the government, all these interventions and stuff is for profit, for corporations that go in there and plunder and, So, I mean, why wouldn't that happen in the United States too? But what's the purpose, though? What's the motivation of this one after the other analyzing these events and, so-called proving that they're problematic and that they don't add up. It doesn't add up. Therefore, it must be a false flag and sort of staged. What is the motivation for it? How many? It's almost like it reminds me of because you probably noticed I'm vegan, and please check out that site because that's a very important thing, and I talk about that a lot. On Real Progressives, and if you want to find that, I'll leave the link to that page so that you can check it out. What's the purpose of it? It's almost like I say, how many slaughterhouse videos do there need to be for people to realize that slaughterhouses are awful? They are awful, and how many sort of animal torture videos do we need to see to realize it's wrong to use sentient animals the way we do, even if it's a happy animal slavery situation? Whatever it is, it's not how we use them, it's that we use them at all. So, but the point I'm saying is, how many slaughterhouse videos do you need to realize something? How many mass shootings? And analyzing that, if one really believes that it's every single one of them is a false flag, for what purpose is it for? In the case of the Las Vegas shooting, where people believe it was so that Chertoff and Adelson can make a lot of money with the X-ray machines in the hotels in Las Vegas and elsewhere. You know what I mean? Everything is so corrupt. What is the purpose of going through it and through it and through it? And why do these people always ignore what's happening overseas? It's like what happens overseas. What their government, the U.S. empire, is doing overseas, and my government is sending troops as well. The Australian government and other Western governments. We're all Western governments, and we're all, profiting in some way from the misery and destruction of other people's lands and their homes and their families. Doesn't that sort of warrant some attention too? Why are these people always sort of obsessing? Like I say, it's an industry, an apocalyptic industry, where people are with monetized sites and literally killing from just these sort of really, really constantly obsessing about, these. It's almost like it's almost like a reality TV series with people analyzing it or something. It's it's almost too like in the end of the Roman Empire, when people went to the Colosseums and saw people being torn to pieces by lions and everything. The bread and circuses thing at the fall of the Roman Empire. We're watching in some ways the fall of the US empire, because all empires fall eventually, and that's what we're watching. We're watching the destruction of US empire, and it may take a while, and it's going to be dangerous as it falls. But I often liken these false flag videos, the conspiracy theory industry it's become on YouTube and elsewhere with the monetization. It's like a bread and circuses thing, and it makes me sad when I see lots and lots, I mean thousands and thousands of people who have even wackier sorts of explanations for things. And I think, how do these people get up in the morning, And, where everything, they think of these, sort of really, really out there, to the point of, sort of thinking that people in power are lizard people. Well, if we're run by lizard people, we're really in trouble, aren't we? And what can we do, right? I have to ask, sort of, what is the purpose of all of this? The U.S. empire, the U.S. government has given you, if you live in the U.S., and many of the pundits are from the U.S., many of these talking heads about conspiracy theories live in the U.S., you've had ample demonstration that your government is absolutely corrupt and is, of course, not all the talking heads are, some of them are real right-wingers and stuff, but you've had ample evidence that your government is extremely corrupt. Both sides of the aisle, the Democratic Party and the GOP, the DNC and the GOP are absolutely, they're just two wings of the same bird, right? They're absolutely corrupt. And they'll do anything at this point, by any means necessary, really. By any means necessary. To, take to, sort of, as Ajama Baraka says, full spectrum dominance. That's what they're looking for. But I see this also because I've said, all these people that I've noticed are all white, and they don't seem to show any interest, in what's being done in their own country to black people. 2 to 3 black people are murdered every day by the state, and it's legal because not really. I think most of these police never ever see the inside of a cell. They're never ever seen as guilty. At worst, they get sort of taken off active duty for a while. And as one cop said in Cobb County somewhere, when he pulled up this white woman and she was freaking out because she thought the cop was going to shoot her, and he said to her, literally, he was caught on tape saying, "Don't worry, we only kill black people." And so he made the mistake of actually verbalizing that, but I'd say that's a sort of an understood sort of position of many of white supremacist police officers. I'm not saying all police officers are bad, but it's common enough in many, many states in the United States that it's obviously some sort of a position, of the police force. It's kind of like, black people are second-class citizens that are expendable, and of course you've got the mass incarceration, which is just neo-slavery, and you've got black people disproportionately represented in prison, and they're making Victoria's Secret garments for people. They're even in call centers. I found out when I interviewed Margaret Kimberley from the Black Agenda Report, I didn't realize that there's actually, when you call up a call center, you're likely to get a person in prison talking to you. I mean, wow, So, and so it's neo-slavery in prison. So, I mean, black people are basically, things haven't changed all that much for black people since the inception of the U.S., for the founding fathers, etc., with the with the white supremacist, constitution. It's, it's written by, mostly written by slaveholders, and the Second Amendment was intended to put down any rebelling black slaves, and also to kill native indigenous tribes that were trying to kind of protect themselves, and then to take their land. That's what the Second Amendment was created for. So anyway, but what I'm saying here is that I often sort of feel like sometimes it feels a bit like these white pundits, talking heads, are sort of it's an infantilization of the public, sort of, it's like, look what mummy and daddy are doing to us. Look, mummy and daddy can't be trusted. Let's analyze what they've done, and let's get really angry about it and write thousands and thousands of comments saying how bad they are, and then we'll wait and then till the next time that they're bad, because they're bound to be bad, because they are bad. It's kind of like, it sort of reminds me of that, sort of like children getting all worked up, and people get really, really worked up. You see it. They get really worked up about it. It's almost like they're, like I say, the bread and circuses, it's like the end of empire, and people are just whipping themselves up into this. They're trying to distract themselves in any way possible. And in some ways it's good that people are awake to their government, because through social media and the availability of information. But in another way, I noticed that a lot of these people on these threads, these threads and these with these people that get right into the conspiracy theories, that a lot of them are white, and they don't have any interest in what their government's doing overseas, murdering millions of brown people, children, and and I sort of think, it's a sort of a deeply racist thing that people don't seem to care about that. They don't even realize it, and yet a lot of them would think of themselves as, they would think of themselves as anti-racist. And I've met people who, call themselves, the real left, and they very rarely show any interest in what's happening, what their government is doing, U.S. government's doing in the Middle East, destroying countries and killing, millions of brown people. They just really, and yet they call themselves anti-racist. That makes me really sad. They're totally focused on what's happening in their own country, which affects them, like healthcare and all this sort of thing, but they don't show really any interest, hardly any interest. They just pay lip service to it, but I don't think it really, but I don't think it really, I don't think it really disturbs them that much. But they get disturbed when, some white guy, kills, and they're always men. That's never something that's ever pointed out. There's a real gender stereotype problem here, that it's always men who are, killing their families, and that's a regular thing. Men taking out their whole family and then killing themselves, killing their partners. I mean, it's, the misogyny and sexism is rampant all over the world. But I mean, it's hardly ever even, it's never ever mentioned that it's always men who are doing these mass murders, mass slaughters, and also the individual sort of family killings, domestic violence, etc., rape and all of that, incest. Anyway, so, but, that's for another time. I mean, that's the elephant in the room. But anyhow, it's sort of, this obsession with these shootings is, is something to do with just not caring. They don't mention anything about these other countries and what their government's doing, but then they totally obsess on these mass shootings, because it's sort of also, it's kind of emotional porn. Everybody gets whipped up. There's always lots of videos. Rarely do you ever see somebody, taking a video of, people don't care so much about brown people being blown to smithereens or being shot down. They don't care. But suddenly everybody cares, when some white man sort of kills a bunch of white people. So, that's something that we need to think about, that this is sort of like a bit of a demonstration of the whole deep-seated, in some ways, racism, in the United States, where people get all sort of beside themselves, when 9/11 happened, there's countless videos and obsession about the And it's awful. Anybody who gets killed is an awful thing, no matter what color they are, no matter how rich, no matter how poor. It's an awful thing. But the point is that, you know, the obsession with, you know, sort of these disasters that happen in the United States, but, you know, hardly a blip on the radar for so-called left people, and you know, about things that are happening overseas, and their complete whipping up obsession. And, you know, it just sometimes it just look, I just sort of feel like when I see the countless you know, comments, you know, the comment section, and these wacky, really, like, honestly, you know, I sort of think, God, are they for real? Because if they are, then they're really not well, you know. There's a lot of comments like that. I don't know if they're paid trolls that do that. I don't even know if, you know, a lot of these videos that are on YouTube, etc., that are really wacky, you know, wacky conspiracy theories, are actually done by, you know, because the CIA does try to control the narrative, and you know, and they've you know, they were intending, they did had an operation, I think it was it Blackbird, I don't know, they had an operation where they were infiltrating the mainstream media, and now I don't think there's any sort of mainstream corporate media that doesn't have some CIA working for them in some way, you know. And that's a real thing. And I don't know if, you know, it's part of their PSYOPs thing of basically flooding YouTube with really wacky conspiracy stuff, so that it swallows up, so that anybody who's actually doing something that's probably a real thing, a real false flag, that it makes everybody look wacky and to be ignored. I think that there's probably that, you know, there's probably employed people that are literally making, because a lot of these videos are really high production stuff, you know, and they really do a lot of work. And so, you know, there's probably that too. I would imagine there probably definitely is employed people to create these really out there video, you know, sort of wacky conspiracy theory things to sort of flood it all, and make anybody who's actually doing real stuff, where there's a real chance that it's a false flag for a purpose, to make that look ridiculous, you know, to make us all look ridiculous. So that's probably definitely happening too. But I don't think it's everybody, but I certainly think that's probably an element of a sort of a PSYOPs thing. And also, you know, it keeps everybody distracted from what's really happening. You know, every time there's something, and it happens regularly enough, and it takes a while to die down. And these people that obsess about conspiracy theories and have to get it out as quickly as possible, even though they don't have a clue what happened, and they're relying on reports from the mainstream media who couldn't find their way out of a paper bag to report what's really happening anywhere. They're basically, they've gotten rid of any investigative reporters in the mainstream media because they don't need them. They just report what the government wants. So, you know, if you're relying on them, which a lot of them seem to do, oh, this didn't match up. They said yesterday that it was 6 minutes before the event, and now it's this. They said it's this now. You know, I mean, you know, if one is relying on the mainstream media for a timeline, good luck. But they do, because they're these talking heads, you know, that sort of seem to make a living literally out of you know, everything that goes on, and then spinning, sort of like some kind of detective using other people's bad information, putting something together. I mean, open source investigation can be very fruitful sometimes, but I don't know. I appreciate people trying to find the truth about stuff. I do, but after a while, I start to think, you know, when I see certain individuals with their monetized sites, sort of just latching on to one thing after another, or obsessing continuously about, say, for example, Hillary Clinton. I mean, there's one channel that just every day it's something else about Hillary Clinton. And, you know, I mean, yeah, she's as corrupt as all get out, but there are so many in Congress that are too. You know, I mean, I doubt that woman will ever see the inside of a prison, even though she should, but so should all of them. I mean, Obama expanded 2 wars to 8, and he's killed, he's killed hundreds of thousands of people. And he got rewarded at the end of his thing with a $400,000 something from Wall Street for doing a speech or something. That was a post bribe, you know. I mean, he had the interests of Wall Street and Citigroup and all of that. Citigroup, I think, helped pick his cabinet for him. You know, these people are, it's a kleptocracy. You know, really. Some just are classier at keeping it to a low profile than others, like Donald Trump is. That's why the deep state hate Donald Trump, because he has no glass. He hasn't read the handbook on how to how to sort of look like you're a good guy, like Obama did. You know, look like you're a good guy, and yet be doing all this awful stuff in the background. You know, you're supposed to. He was. I don't think he was intended to be the market person, the upfront person, the front puppet, to sell what he's supposed to sell for the arms industry and the military-industrial complex and the corporations. He's a bad salesperson, and he's a loose cannon, and they don't like that sort of they don't like that salesperson. So they want to get rid of him and put in, say, Mike Pence, who's a Christian fascist who will be way worse than Donald Trump. Will probably do hideous things, really much worse than Donald Trump, but he's a much better, calmer, he's got the white hair, the white people will love that, the white hair, and he's fairly attractive looking older man, if you like that look, and he's going to be appalling. So, and the irony is, that they'll, the DNC want to get rid of Donald Trump and yet love him and call him presidential when he goes and bombs Syria or something. When he's bombing the bejesus out of poor brown people in other countries, suddenly he's presidential. I mean, both these parties are a duopoly. They're as corrupt as all get out. They lie like rugs. I mean, so when I, see these folks, talking heads, going on about, oh my, the government's lying to us, or they're lying to us. Of course they're lying to you, but not everything that happens, like, when you've got 300 and something million guns in the United States, it only takes somebody getting very, very angry or disillusioned or whatever. And I'm not saying that this is what happened in Las Vegas or anywhere else, but why wouldn't there be somebody just going, going off the deep end and then killing a bunch of people? There are, with everything that's going on there and the lack of mental health services and austerity measures and all this sort of stuff, and just the availability of guns and the ignorance, the rampant ignorance, why wouldn't there be sort of people and the access to automatic weapons, being able to buy dozens of them, and also the attention that one gets. I mean, if somebody feels like they're isolated and they feel like they don't mean anything in the world, well, you can guarantee you'll have plenty, people will know your name for decades down the tracks the more people you kill. So what better way to, go out with literally a bang and have people remember you if you're feeling like you don't matter, and that is to do some sort of mass shooting. So it's sad, and it's very, very sad. And it makes me sadder still to see people just not really caring about all the people that are being murdered in other countries in the name of, in these awful interventionist wars of choice for resources and hegemony by the US empire. It makes me very sad that there is really no anti-war movement to speak of. And what does that say about us? Does it say that we don't care, particularly if we're in the United States, we don't care because in some ways we benefit from those wars for resources and hegemony? Is that why we don't talk about it much or mention it, or at best be silent? So, anyway. Was there anything else I wanted to say, really? I've seen people sort of saying, there's dust that can control your mind, and there's, and these are from people that I thought were fairly intelligent. There's also somebody saying that, the government is sort of is causing these wildfires in California, and they're able to control hurricanes and all sorts of things. Well, if things are that far gone, well, if it's like that, well, what do you want the public to do about it? Is there any plan, or are you just going to document the insanity of it all? That's what I like to ask these people. What is your purpose? What's the motivation of it all, apart from the most obvious one, which is, to have lots of people join your channel and get lots of money from, sort of the advertising and everything, the monetization, which I think, this is where capitalism, people end up making a niche for themselves out of all sorts of things that probably, hopefully, they wouldn't think of doing had they, a supportive social welfare system in the country, so that, if you lost your job, you didn't become destitute, or that there was, and this is where MMT, modern money, the theory, the macroeconomic reality, this is where MMT comes in, and I'll leave a link to that. I won't go into it here, but I'm really a novice at talking about it, so I won't try and talk about it, but I invite you to check out a link I'm going to put called neweconomicperspectives.org, and that would really, really help reduce a lot of what's going on now. But, I just sort of wonder, if there was a really supportive social welfare system in the country, in, say, for example, the US, that people wouldn't just be using anything they could think of to try and profit from it, people just sort of, sometimes I think, there's all these spiritual things, or, yoga was never meant to be a big bourgeois, expensive, money-making thing. Sorry, I got cut off. I was saying, yoga was never meant to be some bourgeois, fancy, very expensive activity. It was never meant for that. And so many things have been sort of exploited. It's fine. I guess if people need to make money and stuff because they don't have very good social support, and also, wages. There's bad unemployment, and wages can be very poor and stuff. So I'm not judging people if they're doing that, but it has become, things like yoga, it's become like this really expensive activity. It was never meant to be that, and that's the problem with capitalism and neoliberalism. People making, making a lot of money out of anything they can think of, anything. And some of it's really scammy stuff, and in some ways I can't blame people for doing that if you're in a country where, if you're unemployed, you can be just like one austerity measure away from being homeless, and that's where MMT comes in. As I said, I'll leave a link about that, and you can look into it. It's very important. But, this is the problem, when capitalism, and taken to its end point, means eating up everything and exploiting everything until there's nothing left. And that's where we are. That's where we are with the planet, the environment. That's why, everything's actually going the other way, instead of things moving toward, in some ways, recyclable energy and all that kind of thing. in some countries it's going in a sort of a good direction, but in the United States, with the current government in particular, but it's been like this anyway, it's actually going in the reverse. It's almost like it's not happening. And the corporate mainstream media, I think they spent 8 minutes or 9 minutes, I think, 1 year talking about climate change. This is the world we live in, where, that's what's going to get us all and end our species, but it's the thing we're least talking about. So anyway, that's really all I wanted to say. I probably could have said this a lot better. I actually, before I did this video, I had some different angles and things that I wanted to talk about, but I think the thing that, as I mentioned, the thing that I find most disturbing about a lot of these conspiracy theory talking heads on YouTube and elsewhere is that it's white people's obsession with drama and with incidents that involve white people, and it's all bread and circuses, and I think of how much time people are wasting sort of obsessing about all this. It's become like an industry, and why are we obsessing about all of this? It's emotional porn and fear porn and everything. We're really just animals, and I think some of us, we're like, we're like little cats, that when they see a mouse and, and their whiskers, poke out and they get all sort of excited, and the adrenaline and all this sort of thing. We're like little animals that sort of, we latch onto some sort of conspiracy theory or some tragedy, and then, it's like our little whiskers go out, and it's like everybody's adrenaline's going, and we can talk about this for days and days and sometimes weeks, and then there'll be another one, and then we can talk about that, and we don't have to think about the awfulness that's happening, or we don't have to think about the millions of brown people that our government's killing overseas, because that's not important, because a few white people being killed is much more important. One white person equals hundreds of thousands of brown people being killed. That's really where it's at, and it's sort of like keeping us entertained until everything falls apart, and that's what's happening. Things are falling apart, and environmentally, and in governments who are just rulers now. They're not really public servants like they're meant to be. They're rulers. They're our rulers, these governments, and they're oligarchs. It was never a democracy in the United States, really. It's an oligarchy. So, that's what it's come to now. And these apocalyptic industry, conspiracy theory things, even though, like I say, I'm not against people looking into things and open source investigations, I think it's all important too. And there's been many conspiracy theories that are actually proven to be false flags. But let's at least pick the ones that count, like, sort of when there's the chemical weapons, the chemical attacks in Syria, as a false flag. They were trying to and the continual obsession with, North Korea and stirring them up and flying over their borders and dropping dummy bombs and exercises with nuclear weaponized jets and things like that. Good goodness, why wouldn't a country be freaked out about that and wanting to have their own nuclear weapons and develop them? There's so many things that are really important, and an anti-war movement is really, really important today. And if you're kind of getting obsessed with talking heads, like, who are, spending more time now on conspiracy theories, every single one that goes by, and saying every single one is a false flag and yada yada, just ask yourself, what is the purpose of all of this? What is the purpose of one thing after another? Is there any action involved, or how much proof do you need, sort of thing, that a government is corrupt? And it doesn't mean that every sort of incident that happens is is an organized false flag. It doesn't mean that. But even if it did, how many do you need anyway? You know, let's try and actually do something to change the world in a positive way. You know, and start with an anti-war movement, and also look into MMT, because that would really change things in a positive way. And also look into veganism, because I couldn't tell you how many ancillary benefits there are in veganism, but the most important reason to be vegan is because 1 trillion land and aquatic animals are sentient. They love life just like we do, and they did not want to be tortured and killed. Every year that happens. 1 trillion land and aquatic animals are tortured and killed each year for trivial reasons of mostly palate pleasure and for habit, convenience, and tradition. And that's appalling. And it's morally unjustifiable, because we don't need animal products to survive. We can easily meet all our nutrition requirements from plants and other non-animal sources. So the only reason we have to be participating in this tremendous violence and injustice is because we think some products taste good. That's got to stop. And we're killing the environment. 51% of greenhouse gases are from animal agriculture. 1 acre every minute of Amazon rainforest is being cleared for animal agriculture and for soy to feed animals in animal agriculture everywhere else. It's creating world hunger. It's destroying river systems. It's 95,000 square miles of dead zones in the ocean. I mean, the list is endless. The dreadful destruction of animal agriculture. One third of the arable land on the planet is taken up with animal agriculture. It takes 1,000 gallons of water to make 1 gallon of milk. It takes 660 gallons of water to make 1 hamburger. I mean, I'm sorry, for want of a better word, it's insane. And it's elitist to be eating animal products, because look at the carnage we're causing, the climate change refugees, and the carnage to non-human sentient beings, non-human sentient animals. And, you know, every 4 days we kill more non-human animals than we've killed all humans in human history, from murders, genocides, wars, and plagues. Every 4 days. So we really, really must. There's so many positive things we could do. You know, go vegan and look into MMT and join anti-war movements and speak out against this terrible injustice to brown people overseas. You know, there's so many good things that we could be doing, and we must do something. Otherwise, we just may as well roll over and die. And I feel like these obsessing about conspiracy theories is a bit of the roll over and die thing. You know, it's a bit of the let's obsess about that and think we're doing something by writing comments in the comment section and liking something. You know, liking a video and sharing it and how exciting it all is. I mean, are we children? So, you know, let's sort of like, you know, let's end the roll over and die kind of bread and circuses, cat whiskers up, sort of adrenaline rushing, emotional porn stuff, and think about what that's all about, and what's the motivation and the end result of that. What's the action you're supposed to take after you've done umpteenth, you know, mass shootings and they're all false flags and whatever. You know, what's the purpose of that? Let's think about that and let's actually do some stuff and address our own racism. You know, if you're a white person, I'm a white person, you know, we have to deconstruct and sort of address our racism every day, because we've been born into a privilege, and where we are privileged as white people. And we can't possibly not be racist in some way. It's not possible. It's like a fish being in water. A fish doesn't realize it's in water. And we don't realize, most of us don't realize the privilege that we have, and also that it's structured in a way, society, so that white people benefit more than other races and cultures. And look at how our countries began with genocides like Australia and the United States. So, you know, we have to address our racism in ourselves every day. And like Ajama Baraka said from the Black Agenda Report, from the Black Peace Alliance, a Black Alliance for Peace, you know, he said, you know, as a man, he's a black man, but he says, as a man, I have to address my sexism every day. Because he's born into a patriarchal system where, you know, men are privileged over women in many, many ways. And so he addresses that every day. You know, he recognizes that he'll always have to work on that, on sexism within himself, you know. He's probably one of the, he's a fabulous guy, and I've never seen any evidence of any sexism, but I know what he's talking about. I know what he's talking about because I'm a white person born into a world where I'm privileged due to the fact that I'm white, and that, you know, I mean, everything on TV is white people, and white people are always favored over, you know, I mean, in movies and everything else, the whole thing, and, you know, what we're revealed and all of that. And when we go for jobs and everything, you know, I couldn't possibly, and you know, you can be so used to that, you don't even realize it. So anyway, let's address, you know, as if you're a white person, let's address that, the racism, the lack of interest in what's happening to brown people or black people in our own country and overseas by our white supremacist, warmongering, colonialist, rapacious, capitalist governments sort of ripping through these other countries and stealing their resources and killing them for it. Let's think about that, because we are the ones that voted those people in. You know, we're ultimately responsible for those people who are now just rulers and doing what the hell they want. Anyway, that's all I really wanted to say. It's probably not exactly what I wanted to say, but anyway, I said it. If I think of some other, if I think of some points that I've probably missed out, maybe I'll do another video. But that's really all I wanted to say. You know, let's not get caught up in this apocalyptic industry, and let's start focusing on some real things that we can do to benefit others. Otherwise, we're lost. Anyway, my name's Trish Roberts, and you're watching Faint Signals from Vega. Till next time, bye for now.